In 3 weeks, I would be wearing a wedding dress that cost more than a penthouse apartment. But in that moment, I didn't even know that Alexander Whitmore existed, much less that he was about to appear in my life in the most embarrassing way possible. The coffee spilled across the mahogany table, staining the important papers that Victoria, my stepmother, had left scattered around like state documents. I, Isabella Thornfield Hayes, yes, my parents had questionable dramatic flair for names, froze with the cup still in my hand, watching the brown liquid spread toward what looked like very expensive contracts. "Isabella!" Victoria's scream echoed through the mansion like the roar of a particularly bad-tempered dragon. "What have you done now?" "It was an accident, I swear," I shouted back, already running toward the kitchen in search of towels. My feet slipped on the marble floor, another gift my late father had left for his second wife, and I nearly collapsed into a pathetic pile of uncoordinated limbs. At 23, I had the grace of a drunken flamingo and the luck of a black cat crossing broken mirrors. Not exactly what one would expect from the daughter of a business magnate, but after Dad died 3 years ago, my life had become a modern and particularly cruel version of Cinderella, only without a fairy godmother or glass slippers. "Isabella, darling." Victoria appeared in the kitchen with that fake smile she reserved for when she wanted to make me feel like a particularly annoying insect. "I need you to go to your father's office today. There are some documents I need you to sign." My half-sister Scarlett chose this moment to make her triumphant entrance, descending the stairs as if she were a model on a haute couture runway. At 21, she had inherited Victoria's classic beauty: silky blonde hair, sapphire blue eyes, and a waist that defied the laws of physics. I, on the other hand, had inherited my father's rebellious golden blonde waves, freckles that looked like they'd been painted by a hyperactive child, and curves that Scarlett always described as rustic. Despite sharing the blonde gene, my hair refused to behave like Scarlett's perfectly smooth locks, instead cascading in wild, untamable waves that had a mind of their own. Where she was polished marble, I was more like, well, a beautiful mess. "Mother, you can't send Isabella to the office dressed like that," Scarlett said, looking at my outfit, faded jeans and a t-shirt that had seen better days, as if I were a personal offense to the concept of fashion. "What if someone important sees her?" "Don't worry, darling," Victoria replied with that little laugh that sounded like nails scratching a blackboard. "Isabella will use the back entrance, won't you, Bella?" The childish nickname hurt more than she imagined. Or maybe she knew exactly how much it hurt. "Of course," I mumbled, because resisting would only make things worse. Back entrance, as always. 2 hours later, I was standing in front of the imposing glass and steel building that housed Thornfield Industries, holding a folder with documents I wasn't allowed to read. The autumn wind played with my rebellious blonde waves, undoing any attempt at taming them I'd made before leaving. The back entrance was next to the dumpster. How symbolic. While struggling with the heavy door, trying to balance the folder, my purse, and what remained of my dignity, I heard voices coming from the executive parking lot. "Mr. Whitmore, are you sure you don't want me to carry that for you?" A respectful male voice. "Thank you, Marcus, but I can handle some papers by myself." The second voice was deep, with a slight accent I couldn't identify. "Despite what my mother thinks, I won't break if I carry my own briefcase." Curiosity killed the cat, and I was apparently the most curious cat in the world. Stretching my neck to peek around the door, I tried to see who owned those voices. That's when it happened. The folder slipped from my arms as if it had a life of its own, opening mid-air in an explosion of papers that flew in all directions like very boring confetti. I launched myself after them in panic, trying to catch the documents before they flew away. "No, no, no!" I screamed, hopping like a desperate kangaroo after a particularly stubborn paper dancing in the wind. That's when we collided, and when I say collided, I mean I literally flew through the air and landed on top of a man who, judging by his pained grunts, clearly wasn't expecting to be knocked down by a human tornado that morning. Oh my God, I'm so sorry." The words poured from my mouth in an incoherent torrent as I tried to untangle myself from the arms and legs, some mine, some his. I was just trying to catch the papers and the wind was kind of strong and... I stopped talking abruptly when our eyes met. Green eyes. The kind of green you see in expensive emeralds or enchanted forests. And they were looking at me with an expression I couldn't interpret. Surprise, amusement, concussion. "Are you okay?" I asked, realizing I was still kind of lying on top of him in the middle of the parking lot. My hair had formed a curtain around our faces, creating a strange and embarrassing kind of intimacy. He blinked a few times, as if trying to process what had just happened. "I think so." His hair was dark as bitter chocolate, with some rebellious strands falling over his forehead. He had the kind of jawline that appears on romance novel covers. And even with a confused expression, he was obviously handsome in a way that should be illegal. "Are you sure?" I insisted, finally getting up and offering my hand to help him. "Because I kind of flew into you like a human wrecking ball and..." "A very beautiful wrecking ball," he said, accepting my hand and getting up with a grace I clearly didn't possess. I felt my face heat up as if someone had turned on an oven inside my cheeks. What? Sorry." He smiled, and I swear the world got a little brighter. "Didn't mean to embarrass you. It's just that, well, it's not every day a beautiful woman literally falls from heaven into my life." "I didn't fall from heaven," I replied, in a desperate attempt to seem less idiotic. "I was trying to catch some papers that flew away because the folder opened and... oh no. The papers!" Reality hit me like a bucket of cold water. Victoria's documents were scattered across the parking lot, some already flying toward the busy street. "Hey, calm down!" The mysterious man gently touched my shoulder. "We'll get them all. Marcus!" He waved to a man in a suit who was watching the scene with poorly disguised interest. "Can you help us collect these papers?" And so began the most embarrassing rescue operation of my life. I, the most handsome man I'd ever seen, who apparently was called something Whitmore, if I'd heard correctly. And Marcus ran around the parking lot like madmen chasing rebellious papers. "Got one!" I shouted triumphantly, diving after a document that had stuck to a red car. "Excellent diving technique," commented Mr. Whitmore, appearing beside me with 3 papers in his hand. "Have you ever thought about Olympic sports?" "Very funny," I replied, but I was smiling. How was it possible that he could make me laugh in a situation like this? 15 minutes later, we were sitting on the curb, organizing the messy paperwork. I had leaves in my hair, my t-shirt was dirty, and I probably looked like someone who had just lost a fight with a windstorm. He, on the other hand, was still impeccable, except for a small grass stain on his pants knee. "So," he said, handing me the last paper. "I presume you work here?" "Not exactly." I hesitated, not wanting to explain my family's complicated situation. "I had some documents to deliver. Nothing important." "Thornfield Industries?" he read from one of the paper headers. "Interesting." Something in the way he said it made me look at him more carefully. "Why?" "Oh, just professional curiosity." He stood up and extended his hand to help me. "By the way, my name is Alex. Isabella." I accepted his hand, trying to ignore the small electric spark I felt when our fingers touched. "And thank you for helping me with the papers, and for not suing me for assault." "Assault?" He laughed, and the sound was better than music. It was more like a memorable introduction. We stood there for a moment, still holding hands, him looking at me in a way that made my stomach do pirouettes. I was beginning to think that maybe, just maybe, this day wouldn't be a complete disaster when Marcus appeared beside him. "Mr. Whitmore, sorry to interrupt, but your meeting with the Thornfield board starts in 10 minutes. The world stopped. Mr. Whitmore, meeting Thornfield. "Wait," I said slowly, feeling as if someone had replaced my brain with cotton candy. You work with Thornfield?" Alex, Mr. Whitmore, smiled in a way that was half apologetic, half amused. "Actually, my company is considering buying Thornfield Industries. Sorry for not mentioning it before. And that's how I discovered I had literally flown into the arms of the man who could be about to buy my late father's company and possibly change my life forever. As he walked away toward the building's main entrance, because of course he would use the main entrance, I stood there in the parking lot, still holding the messy papers, trying to process what had just happened. Victoria was going to kill me when she found out I had, literally, bumped into the potential new owner of the company. But as I watched Alex disappear through the glass doors, a rebellious part of me was thinking that maybe, just maybe, being killed by Victoria would be worth it if it meant I'd see those green eyes again. Little did I know that in less than a month, I would be discovering that sometimes the universe has a very peculiar sense of humor. And sometimes, fairy tales happen in the most unexpected places, like in a company parking lot, among flying papers and scraped knees. If someone had told me that morning that I'd spend the afternoon hiding in a supply closet, eavesdropping on my own stepmother, I would have suggested they seek professional help. But there I was, surrounded by cleaning supplies and my own questionable life choices. You did what? Victoria's voice could have shattered crystal 3 counties away. I stood in the marble foyer, still holding the crumpled papers, feeling like a defendant awaiting execution. I delivered the documents like you asked, I said weakly, not mentioning the part where I'd basically tackled the potential new CEO in a parking lot. Some details were better left unsaid. Scarlett appeared at the top of the grand staircase like a blonde avenging angel, her perfectly manicured hand sliding down the mahogany banister. "Mother, what's all the shouting about? I'm trying to do my meditation." Since when did Scarlett meditate? Last I checked, her idea of spiritual enlightenment involved maxing out credit cards on Rodeo Drive. "Your sister," Victoria spat the word like it tasted bad, "apparently made quite an impression at the office today." "I literally just delivered papers," I protested, but Victoria's laser blue glare could have melted steel. "Mrs. Patterson from the front desk called. She said you caused some sort of commotion in the executive parking area." Victoria's voice dripped with disdain. "Something about papers flying everywhere and you throwing yourself at some businessman?" Scarlett gasped dramatically, one hand flying to her throat. "Isabella, you didn't." "I didn't throw myself at anyone," I exclaimed, though technically that wasn't entirely accurate. There was wind and papers, and I may have accidentally collided with someone, but... Who? Victoria's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Who did you accidentally collide with?" I opened my mouth, then closed it again. Something in Victoria's tone set off warning bells in my head. She seemed less concerned about my clumsiness and more interested in the identity of my collision victim. "Just some guy," I mumbled, clutching the papers tighter. "Nobody important." Victoria studied my face with the intensity of a detective interrogating a suspect. "Isabella, darling, you know how important this week is for our family's future, don't you?" "Our family's future." "Right, because I was totally included in family planning sessions." "Of course," I lied smoothly. "Good." Victoria's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "Then you'll understand why I need you to stay close to home for the next few days. No unnecessary trips, no errands, no accidents." "But I have a job interview tomorrow at—" "Cancel it!" The finality in her voice made my stomach drop. "Victoria, I need—" "What you need," she interrupted, stepping closer until I could smell her expensive perfume, "is to remember that this house, your allowance, and your very comfortable life all depend on certain business arrangements going smoothly. Arrangements that could be jeopardized by complications." The threat was crystal clear, even wrapped in Victoria's sugary tone. I nodded mutely, hating myself for my cowardice. "Wonderful." She clapped her hands together as if we'd just planned a delightful tea party. "Scarlett, darling, why don't you take Isabella upstairs? I have some important calls to make." 20 minutes later, I was sitting on my bed staring at my laptop screen, supposedly job hunting but actually replaying every moment of my encounter with Alex Whitmore. The way he'd smiled when he called me beautiful, the warmth of his hand when he helped me up. Those incredible green eyes that seemed to see right through me. I was in serious trouble, not just because I'd made a fool of myself in front of a potential billionaire, but because I couldn't stop thinking about him. Which was ridiculous. I'd known the man for exactly 15 minutes, most of which I'd spent sprawled on top of him in a parking lot. My phone buzzed with a text from my best friend, Emma. "Coffee later? I have gossip that will melt your brain." Before I could reply, I heard voices drifting up from Victoria's study below my room. The heating vents in this old house carried sound in weird ways, and I'd learned years ago that if I sat in just the right spot on my bedroom floor, I could hear conversations from downstairs. Not that I made a habit of eavesdropping. Much. "Told you this would be delicate," Victoria was saying. "The Whitmore acquisition could solve all our problems, but only if everything goes perfectly." My blood turned to ice. Whitmore acquisition. What if she finds out? Another voice. Scarlett. "About the will, I mean. About what really?" "She won't," Victoria cut her off sharply. "As long as we control the situation, as long as she stays properly distracted." "But Mother, what if Alexander Whitmore? What if Alexander Whitmore what?" Victoria's voice was dangerously quiet. "What if he's actually interested in her? Mrs. Patterson said he seemed quite taken with the girl who bumped into him. What if it was Isabella?" A long silence. Then Victoria's laugh, cold and calculating. "Darling, have you seen your sister lately? Really looked at her? That wild hair, those ridiculous freckles, the way she dresses like a college student having a nervous breakdown? Alexander Whitmore is used to sophisticated women, polished women, women like me?" Scarlett's voice was smug. "Exactly like you." My heart cracked a little. Even after 3 years of living with Victoria, her casual cruelty still had the power to wound me. "Besides," Victoria continued, "even if by some miracle he was interested in Isabella, it wouldn't matter. She doesn't know about the clause in her father's will. She doesn't know that if she marries before 25, control of her inheritance transfers to her husband. And she certainly doesn't know that her inheritance is worth approximately $50 million. The world tilted sideways. $50 million. "The Whitmore deal is our backup plan," Victoria was saying. "But if Isabella falls for some fortune hunter and marries young, we'd have direct access to her father's money without having to sell the company at all. So we just wait for her to fall in love? Oh, darling, we're not leaving this to chance. I have someone perfect in mind, someone who can sweep our little Isabella off her feet, marry her quickly, and then, well, let's just say that certain legal arrangements can be made to ensure the money ends up where it belongs." "With us," Scarlett said with satisfaction. "With us," Victoria agreed. "Isabella has always been far too trusting, too romantic. It should be embarrassingly easy to manipulate her into a convenient marriage." I sat frozen on my bedroom floor, my mind reeling. $50 million. A clause in Dad's will that I knew nothing about. A scheme to marry me off to some con artist who would steal my inheritance. And somewhere in all this, Alexander Whitmore, who might be genuinely interested in me, or might be part of Victoria's plan, or might be completely innocent and about to walk into the world's most complicated family drama. My phone buzzed again. Emma. "Seriously, this gossip is huge. Meet me at Café Luna in an hour." I stared at the message, then at my bedroom door, then back at my phone. Victoria wanted me to stay home and be a good little pawn in her game. But I'd never been particularly good at following orders. And if I was sitting on a $50 million inheritance that I knew nothing about, maybe it was time I started asking some questions. I grabbed my jacket and headed for the door, my heart pounding with equal parts terror and determination. Time to find out what other secrets my family had been keeping from me. And maybe, just maybe, time to figure out if the gorgeous man I'd literally fallen for was my knight in shining armor or just another player in Victoria's twisted game. You know that moment when you think your life can't get any more complicated, and then the universe laughs and says, "Hold my beer"? That was me, sitting in Cafe Luna, about to discover that my morning collision was the least shocking thing that would happen to me that day. Emma Martinez was already at our usual corner table when I burst through the cafe door like a woman possessed, my blonde waves looking like I'd been electrocuted, and my eyes probably wild with the kind of desperation that comes from discovering your entire life is a lie. "Holy mother of designer handbags," Emma said, looking up from her laptop. "You look like you've seen a ghost, wrestled with it, and lost spectacularly." "Emma." I collapsed into the chair across from her with all the grace of a deflating balloon. "I need coffee. Strong coffee. Coffee that could wake the dead and possibly reorganize my entire existence." "Okay. Dramatic much?" She signaled the waitress with the efficiency of someone who'd been caffeinating my breakdowns for the past 5 years. "But before we dive into whatever crisis has turned you into a blonde tornado of chaos, I have news that's going to blow your mind. Unless your news involves secret inheritances, evil stepmothers, and mysterious millionaires, I think my day has you beat in the mind-blowing department." Emma's perfectly sculpted eyebrows shot up. "Mysterious millionaires? Isabella Thornfield Hayes, what have you been up to?" The waitress appeared with what Emma had trained her to recognize as my emergency espresso, a triple shot that could probably power a small aircraft. "You first," I said, taking a gulp that burned away at least some of my panic. "What's this earth-shattering gossip?" Emma leaned forward conspiratorially, her dark eyes sparkling with the kind of glee that came from having premium information. "Alexander Whitmore." I choked on my coffee. "What about him?" "You know who Alexander Whitmore is?" Emma's voice pitched higher with excitement. "Isabella, please tell me you're not about to say what I think you're about to say. I may have encountered him this morning." "Encountered?" Emma's shriek made half the cafe turn to stare. She lowered her voice to a stage whisper. "Isabella, Alexander Whitmore is only the most eligible bachelor on the East Coast. Forbes just did a whole article on him. 32 years old, inherited Whitmore Holdings when he was 25, worth approximately $3 billion. And get this, he's never been seriously linked to anyone. $3 billion. My brain tried to process that number and gave up. "But here's the really juicy part," Emma continued, pulling up something on her laptop. "My cousin works at Thornfield Industries, in accounting. She heard through the grapevine that Whitmore Holdings is considering a major acquisition, and rumor has it they're looking at your dad's company." "Yeah, about that," I started, but Emma was on a roll. "And then, Mrs. Patterson from the front desk apparently called everyone she knows because some girl assaulted Alexander Whitmore in the parking lot this morning, and he seemed completely smitten instead of calling security." I buried my face in my hands. Oh God. "Isabella." Emma's voice went very quiet and very dangerous. "Please tell me you were not the girl who assaulted the most eligible billionaire in America." "Define assaulted," I mumbled through my fingers. "Isabella! I may have accidentally tackled him while chasing flying paperwork and then spent 15 minutes rolling around on the ground with him collecting documents." The words tumbled out in a rush. "But that's not even the worst part." Emma stared at me for a long moment, then slowly started to smile. "Not the worst part? What could possibly be worse than accidentally taking down a billionaire?" And that's when I told her everything. The inheritance, Victoria's scheme, the mysterious marriage clause, the $50 million I apparently had but couldn't access, the plan to marry me off to some fortune hunter. By the time I finished, Emma's expression had gone through approximately 17 different stages of shock, outrage, and calculating interest. "So let me get this straight," she said finally. "You're secretly worth $50 million. Your stepmother is plotting to steal it through some elaborate marriage scam, and this morning you literally fell into the arms of the one man who could either save your father's company or completely destroy your family's financial stability. That pretty much sums it up." "Isabella." Emma reached across the table and grabbed my hands. Do you realize what this means? That my life is a disaster? No, you beautiful, oblivious disaster. It means you're living in a real-life fairy tale. You're Cinderella, Victoria is the evil stepmother, Scarlet is the wicked stepsister, and Alexander Whitmore might just be your Prince Charming. Or he might be part of Victoria's plan, I pointed out glumly. Did he seem like he was part of some elaborate scheme when you were tangled up with him in a parking lot? I thought about those green eyes, the way he'd smiled when he called me beautiful, the genuine warmth in his voice. No, I admitted. He seemed nice, real. Then maybe, just maybe, the universe is trying to tell you something. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Hi Isabella, this is Alex Whitmore. I hope you don't mind. I got your number from Marcus, who got it from building security. Completely legitimate, I promise. I was wondering if you'd like to have dinner tonight. I know a place that serves excellent coffee in case you need to throw more beverages around. Alex. I stared at the screen, my heart doing acrobatics that would make Olympic gymnasts jealous. Emma, I said slowly. Alexander Whitmore just asked me out. What? Emma lunged across the table, nearly knocking over both our coffees. Let me see that. She read the message, then looked at me with an expression of pure awe. Isabella, this man is flirting with you via text message. He's making jokes about your clumsiness. This is not the behavior of someone who's part of an evil stepmother conspiracy. But what if... No. Emma held up a hand. No what-ifs. You're going on this date. I can't. Victoria specifically told me to stay home and avoid complications. Exactly, which is why you're definitely going. Emma's grin was positively feral. Besides, what's the worst that could happen? I stared at her. Did you just ask, what's the worst that could happen about my life? Emma, I attract disaster like a magnet attracts metal filings. True, she conceded. But you also just accidentally tackled a billionaire and somehow made him fall for you in 15 minutes. I'd say your disaster magnetism is working in your favor for once. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Alex. I should probably mention, Marcus insisted I tell you that I'm not a serial killer, kidnapper, or door-to-door salesman. His words, not mine, though I can provide references if needed. Despite everything, I found myself smiling. He's really funny. He's really into you, Emma corrected. Isabella, when was the last time you did something just because you wanted to? Not because Victoria told you to. I couldn't remember. That was the problem. Text him back, Emma commanded. Say yes to dinner. And then we're going shopping because you are not meeting your potential Prince Charming in jeans and a t-shirt that's older than some high school students. Emma, Isabella. Her voice went serious. Your stepmother has been controlling your life for 3 years. She's stolen your inheritance, kept you in the dark about your own financial situation, and now she's planning to marry you off like your livestock. Don't you think it's time you took control of your own story? She was right. God help me. She was absolutely right. I picked up my phone and typed, Dinner sounds perfect. Fair warning, though. I'm disaster prone. You might want to wear protective gear. Isabella. His response came back almost immediately. I'll take my chances. Pick you up at 7? And Isabella, I happen to like disasters, especially beautiful blonde ones. Alex. Emma squealed so loudly that the barista dropped a cup. We, she announced, standing up and gathering her things, are going to make you so gorgeous that when Alexander Whitmore sees you tonight, he's going to forget how to speak English. As she dragged me toward the door, I couldn't help but feel like I was standing at the edge of a cliff, about to jump into something that would either be the best decision of my life or the most spectacular disaster yet. Knowing my luck, it would probably be both. They say getting ready for a first date is supposed to be fun. They clearly never tried to transform from disaster-prone Cinderella to billionaire-worthy princess in 6 hours while having a complete emotional breakdown. I can't do this, I announced for the 17th time, staring at my reflection in Emma's full-length mirror. I look ridiculous, like I'm playing dress-up in someone else's life. "You look stunning," Emma said firmly, making final adjustments to the navy blue dress that hugged curves I didn't even know I had. "And if you say you can't do this one more time, I'm going to lock you in this room until Alex arrives." The dress was a masterpiece of understated elegance, sleeveless, hitting just above the knee, with a neckline that was sophisticated without being scandalous. Emma had worked some kind of magic on my wild blonde waves, taming them into soft, romantic curls that cascaded over my shoulders. My makeup was flawless, but natural, emphasizing my green eyes and making my freckles look like they'd been artfully placed by a Renaissance painter. I looked beautiful. Actually, genuinely beautiful. Which terrified me more than looking like a disaster. "What if I spill something on him again?" I asked, smoothing the dress nervously. "What if I trip walking to the restaurant? What if I say something stupid and he realizes I'm just a walking catastrophe?" "Then he'll fall even more in love with you," Emma said, handing me a small clutch purse. "Isabella, that man has seen you at your absolute worst, covered in parking lot debris, wrestling with flying papers, hair like you'd been struck by lightning, and he still asked you out. Trust me, a little dinner conversation isn't going to scare him off." My phone buzzed. "Alex, running 5 minutes late. Traffic is apparently as chaotic as our first meeting. Hope you don't mind waiting for a disaster-prone billionaire." "He's late," I announced, relief flooding through me. "Maybe we should reschedule. Maybe this is a sign." "It's a sign that he's human," Emma interrupted. "And look, he's already making jokes about being disaster-prone, too. You two are perfect for each other." The doorbell rang, and my heart launched itself into my throat. "Deep breaths," Emma coached, steering me toward the stairs. "Remember, you're a goddess. You're mysterious. You're worth $50 million. "Don't remind me about the money thing," I hissed. "I'm nervous enough without thinking about—" "Isabella?" Alex's voice carried through the front door, and I nearly melted on the spot. Even muffled by wood and glass, that voice could make reading a phone book sound like poetry. Emma opened the door with a flourish, and I got my first proper look at Alexander Whitmore in something other than parking lot collision circumstances. Holy Mother of God. He was wearing a charcoal gray suit that had clearly been tailored by angels, with a crisp white shirt open at the collar and no tie, casual enough to be approachable, formal enough to stop traffic. His dark hair was perfectly styled, and when he smiled, I was pretty sure every functioning brain cell I possessed packed up and went on vacation. "Isabella," he said, and the way he said my name made my knees go weak. "You look— Wow." "Wow," Emma prompted with barely concealed glee. "Absolutely stunning," Alex clarified, his green eyes never leaving mine. "I mean, you were beautiful this morning covered in parking lot debris, but this is going to make it very difficult for me to form coherent sentences all evening." Emma made a small squeaking sound that she tried to disguise as a cough. "You clean up pretty well yourself," I managed, proud that I'd formed actual words instead of just making dolphin noises. "Shall we?" He offered his arm, and when I took it, I felt that same electric spark from the morning. Fair warning, I made reservations at Chez Laurent, which has tablecloths white enough to show every possible stain. I figured we should live dangerously. "You did not just reference my spilling abilities on our first date," I laughed, some of my nervousness melting away. "I absolutely did. I'm hoping it becomes our thing." Emma practically shoved us out the door before I could overthink that comment. Chez Laurent was the kind of restaurant that appeared in movies about wealthy people falling in love. Soft lighting, fresh flowers on every table, and waiters who glided rather than walked. The maitre d' led us to a corner table with a view of the city lights, and I tried not to think about how much this dinner probably cost. "So," Alex said after we'd ordered wine, he'd graciously allowed me to choose something that wouldn't stain if spilled. "Tell me about yourself. What do you do when you're not accidentally tackling businessmen?" I hesitated. What did I do? I'd graduated from college with a degree in art history, but Victoria had convinced me that finding a job wasn't urgent since I was family legacy at Thornfield Industries. I'd spent the last year doing volunteer work and feeling increasingly useless. I'm between careers at the moment, trying to figure out what I want to do with my life. That's honest, he said with a smile. Most people would give me some elaborate story about pursuing their passion or following their dreams. Well, my passion seems to be creating minor disasters wherever I go, I said, relaxing slightly. I'm still working on monetizing that particular skill set. He laughed, a rich, warm sound that made my stomach flutter. I think you're being too hard on yourself. This morning's collision was the highlight of my entire week. Really? That's either very sweet or deeply concerning for your social life. Probably both, he admitted. I don't get out much. Business takes up most of my time. And when you have money, it's hard to know if people are interested in you or your bank account. The honesty in his voice caught me off guard. For someone worth billions, he seemed almost lonely. Must be difficult, I said softly, not knowing who to trust. It is. He met my eyes directly. Which is why this morning was so refreshing. You clearly had no idea who I was, and you were more concerned about your scattered papers than impressing me. If only he knew how little I'd known about anything this morning. What about you? I asked, steering the conversation away from dangerous territory. When you're not considering corporate acquisitions, what do you do for fun? I restore vintage motorcycles, he said, and I nearly choked on my wine. Motorcycles? You? I know. Rich boy with a suit and a boardroom doesn't exactly scream motorcycle enthusiast. But there's something about taking apart an engine and putting it back together that's peaceful. It's honest work with my hands. That's actually incredibly attractive, I said before I could stop myself, then felt my face flame red. I mean, it is? His grin was devastating. Good to know. I was worried my hobby made me sound like a walking midlife crisis. No, it makes you sound real, grounded. I took a sip of wine to buy myself time. Most people in your position probably have hobbies like collecting rare art or yacht racing. I tried yacht racing once. Turns out I get seasick. He leaned forward conspiratorially. Don't tell my competitors. It might damage my ruthless business tycoon reputation. Your secret is safe with me, I promised, laughing. The conversation flowed like we'd known each other for years rather than hours. He told me about growing up with expectations and board meetings instead of birthday parties. I told him about my art history degree and my secret dream of opening a small gallery someday. He was funny, self-deprecating, and surprisingly down-to-earth for someone who probably owned small countries. Isabella, he said as we shared dessert, creme brulee that I'd managed not to set myself on fire with. Can I ask you something? Sure. This morning, when you said you were delivering documents to Thornfield Industries, your last name is Thornfield Hayes. Is there a connection to the company? My blood turned to ice. Here it was, the moment when everything would get complicated. My father founded the company, I said carefully. He passed away 3 years ago. Alex's expression grew serious. I'm sorry for your loss. That must have been difficult. It was. I looked down at my hands. Everything changed after that. The acquisition, he said slowly. If it goes through, it would affect you personally. I honestly don't know much about the business side, I said, which was true enough. My stepmother handles all of that. He was quiet for a moment, and I could practically see him processing this information. Isabella, he said finally, I want you to know that whatever happens with the business, it won't change anything between us. Tonight, it has nothing to do with corporate deals or acquisitions. It's just this. He reached across the table and took my hand, and I felt that electric spark again, stronger this time. Just this, I repeated softly. Just this, he confirmed, squeezing my fingers gently. And in that moment, Sitting in that perfect restaurant with this incredible man holding my hand, I almost believed that maybe, just maybe, fairy tales could come true. Even for disaster-prone Cinderellas, who didn't know they were princesses. You know how in fairy tales, midnight is when the magic ends and everything goes back to normal? Well, in my story, midnight was when the real magic began, and when I discovered that sometimes the worst disasters lead to the most beautiful moments. Alex walked me to Emma's front door at 11:47 p.m., our fingers intertwined like we'd been holding hands for years instead of hours. The autumn air was crisp, making me grateful for his suit jacket draped over my shoulders, a gesture so classically romantic I half expected background music to start playing. "Thank you," I said softly as we reached the porch steps. "For dinner, for the conversation, for everything. This was perfect." "It was perfect," he agreed, turning to face me. In the soft glow of the porch light, his green eyes looked almost luminous. "Isabella, I know this might sound crazy given that we've known each other for exactly 1 day, but..." His phone exploded with sound, a harsh, urgent ringtone that shattered the romantic moment like a brick through glass. "I'm sorry," he said, glancing at the screen with a frown. "It's my assistant. She only calls this late if there's an emergency." "Take it," I said, though disappointment settled in my stomach like a stone. "Sarah?" Alex answered, his voice shifting into business mode. "What's wrong?" I couldn't hear the other side of the conversation, but I watched Alex's expression change from mild concern to serious worry to what looked like barely controlled anger. "Are you absolutely certain?" he said finally. "The documents are legitimate?" "I see. No, you did the right thing calling me. I'll be in the office first thing tomorrow." "Yes, cancel everything else." He hung up and stood there for a moment, staring at his phone with an expression I couldn't read. "Alex, is everything okay?" He looked up at me, and something in his eyes made my heart clench. "Isabella, there's something I need to tell you about the Thornfield acquisition." Before he could continue, the front door burst open and Emma appeared, her hair in curlers and her face a mask of panic. "Isabella, thank God you're back." She grabbed my arm, completely ignoring Alex. "You need to come inside right now. Victoria called looking for you, and she sounded absolutely murderous. Apparently Scarlett told her about your date, and..." "Emma," I interrupted. "This is Alex. Alex, my best friend Emma." "Nice to meet you," Alex said politely, but I could tell his mind was elsewhere. Oh! Emma's eyes went wide as she realized she was meeting the Alexander Whitmore. "I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. It's just that Victoria..." "It's fine," I said quickly. "Alex was just about to tell me something about business." "Actually," Alex said, his phone buzzing again, "maybe we should talk tomorrow. This isn't really the time or place for..." "Mr. Whitmore?" A new voice cut through the night. We all turned to see Marcus approaching from a sleek black car parked at the curb. "I'm sorry to interrupt, sir, but your mother has been calling. She says it's urgent regarding the board meeting tomorrow." Alex closed his eyes briefly, and I could see him struggling with some internal decision. "Isabella," he said finally, "I have to go. There's a situation that requires immediate attention. But can we have lunch tomorrow? There are things we need to discuss about..." "About what?" I asked, though part of me didn't want to know. "About your family's company. About why I'm really in town." His voice was gentle but serious. About how complicated this situation might be. A chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the autumn air. "Complicated how?" "I'll explain everything tomorrow, I promise." He leaned down and kissed my cheek softly, his lips warm against my skin. "Tonight was wonderful, Isabella. Don't let whatever you learn tomorrow change that." And then he was gone, leaving me standing on the porch with Emma, my mind spinning with questions and a growing sense of dread. "Okay," Emma said, pulling me inside and locking the door behind us. "Start talking." "What was that about? And why do you look like you've seen a ghost?" I collapsed onto her couch, Alex's jacket still wrapped around my shoulders. I think I'm in trouble, Em. Big trouble. What kind of trouble? Rich, handsome billionaire trouble, or your evil stepmother is planning your doom trouble? Maybe both? I buried my face in my hands. Alex knows about the Thornfield connection. He figured out that my father founded the company. And from that phone call, it sounds like something major is happening with the acquisition. Something good or something bad? I don't know. But the way he looked when he said we needed to talk about how complicated this situation might be, I shuddered. Emma, what if he's been playing me this whole time? What if this is all part of some elaborate business strategy? Did it feel like he was playing you? Emma asked, settling beside me with 2 glasses of wine that had appeared from nowhere. During dinner, when you were talking and laughing and getting all starry-eyed, I thought about the conversation, about how easy and natural everything had felt, about the way he'd smiled when talking about his motorcycle hobby, or how he'd admitted to getting seasick, about the moment when he'd taken my hand and promised that business wouldn't change what was between us. No, I said quietly. It felt real. Everything about tonight felt real. Then maybe it was real. Maybe whatever complication he's talking about is something that happened to him, not something he planned. Before I could respond, my phone rang. Victoria's name flashed on the screen like a harbinger of doom. Don't answer it, Emma said immediately. I have to. If I don't, she'll just keep calling, and then she'll probably show up here with the police or something equally dramatic. I swiped to answer. Hello, Victoria. Isabella. Her voice was ice-cold fury. Where exactly have you been tonight? I had dinner with a friend, I said carefully. A friend named Alexander Whitmore? My blood turned to slush. How did you... Scarlett saw you leaving with him. Do you have any idea what you've done? Any idea how you may have jeopardized everything? Victoria, I don't understand. Of course you don't understand. You never understand anything. Her voice rose to a near shriek. Alexander Whitmore is here to destroy us, Isabella. His company is trying to buy Thornfield Industries for a fraction of what it's worth, and thanks to your little romantic dinner, he now knows exactly who you are. What do you mean, destroy us? I mean that if the acquisition goes through, we lose everything. The house, the money, our entire way of life. And now, thanks to your stupidity, he has inside information about our family. I felt like I was falling down a very deep hole. Victoria, what aren't you telling me? A long pause. Then, in a voice dripping with venom, come home, Isabella. Now. It's time you learned exactly what your father's will really says. The line went dead. Emma and I stared at each other in the sudden silence. That, Emma said finally, did not sound good. No, I agreed, my hands shaking as I set down the phone. It really didn't. You're not going home tonight, Emma declared. Whatever Victoria wants to tell you can wait until morning. You need time to think, and you definitely don't need to walk into whatever trap she's setting while you're emotionally vulnerable. But what if Alex? What if Alex what? What if he's exactly who he seemed to be tonight? A good man caught in a complicated business situation that has nothing to do with his feelings for you. I wanted to believe that. God, I wanted to believe that more than anything. Emma, I said slowly, what if I've fallen for someone who's about to destroy my family? Then, Emma said firmly, you'll figure out how to save both your family and your love story. Because that's what heroines do, Isabella. They don't just wait for someone else to rescue them. Outside it began to rain, soft at first, then harder, drumming against the windows like the universe itself was crying. I pulled Alex's jacket tighter around me, breathing in the faint scent of his cologne, and tried to prepare myself for whatever revelations tomorrow would bring. Because something told me that by this time tomorrow, everything I thought I knew about my life would be different, and the man I was falling in love with might be standing on the opposite side of a battle I didn't even know I was fighting. They say the truth will set you free, but nobody mentions that first, it will completely destroy everything you thought you knew about your life, your family, and the man you're falling in love with. I stood in the foyer of the Thornfield mansion at 9 a.m. sharp, still wearing Alex's jacket over yesterday's dress, feeling like a warrior heading into battle, armed only with determination, and Emma's pep talk echoing in my ears. "You're a $50 million heiress, not a victim. Act like it." Victoria waited in the formal living room like a queen holding court, wearing a cream-colored suit that probably cost more than most people's cars. Scarlett perched on the antique settee beside her, perfectly manicured nails drumming against her coffee cup in what I'd learned to recognize as barely contained excitement. "Isabella," Victoria said, without looking up from the legal documents spread across the mahogany coffee table. "How lovely of you to finally grace us with your presence." "You said we needed to talk about Father's will," I replied, deciding to skip the pleasantries. "So let's talk. Straight to the point. How refreshingly direct." Victoria's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "Very well. Sit down, darling. This might come as something of a shock." I remained standing. "I'll take my chances." "As you wish." Victoria lifted a thick document from the pile. "This, my dear stepdaughter, is your father's actual will. Not the simplified version the lawyers read at the funeral, but the complete document with all its interesting clauses." My heart began to hammer against my ribs, but I kept my voice steady. "What kind of clauses?" "The kind that explain why your little dinner date last night was such a catastrophe." Scarlett's voice was honey-sweet with malice. "Tell her about the inheritance, Mother." Victoria's eyes glittered with something that looked disturbingly like triumph. "Your father left you $53 million, Isabella. But there's a catch." "What kind of catch?" "You can only access the money under two specific conditions. Either you marry before your 25th birthday, at which point control transfers to your husband." Victoria paused dramatically. "Or the Thornfield Industries board votes to dissolve the company, at which point you receive your inheritance directly." The room spun slightly. "Dissolve the company? Sell it, darling. Break it apart. Destroy what your father built." Victoria's voice was perfectly calm, as if she were discussing the weather. "Which is exactly what Alexander Whitmore is here to do." "That's not—" I started, then stopped. Alex's mysterious phone call. His insistence that we needed to talk about complications. The way he'd looked when he mentioned the acquisition. "Oh, but it is," Scarlett chimed in gleefully. "Whitmore Holdings isn't buying Thornfield to preserve it. They're buying it to strip it for parts. The real estate alone is worth twice what they're offering for the whole company." "You're lying," I said, but my voice sounded weak even to my own ears. Victoria pulled out another document. "Board meeting minutes from yesterday evening. Emergency session called after some very interesting financial documents came to light." She smiled that terrifying smile again. "It seems someone has been feeding information to Whitmore Holdings. Someone with intimate knowledge of our company's weaknesses." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying, my dear, that your romantic dinner companion has been planning this acquisition for months. And now, thanks to your charming little collision yesterday, he knows exactly who you are and what you stand to gain from the company's dissolution." The words hit me like physical blows. "You think Alex is using me?" "I think," Victoria said, rising from her chair with predatory grace, "that Alexander Whitmore is a very clever man who just discovered that seducing the founder's daughter would be far easier than fighting a hostile takeover." "That's insane," I whispered, but doubt was creeping in like poison. The timing of everything. The way Alex had asked about my connection to Thornfield. His promise that business wouldn't affect us. What if he'd said that because he was already planning to use our relationship for business? "Is it insane?" Victoria asked softly. "Or is it exactly what a brilliant businessman would do when faced with an unexpectedly simple solution to a complex problem?" My phone buzzed. A text from Alex. "Good morning, beautiful. Still on for lunch? I have so much to explain about yesterday." "A." Victoria glanced at my phone and smiled. "How convenient. He wants to explain everything." She moved closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Isabella, darling, let me ask you something. Did Alexander Whitmore seem surprised when he learned about your connection to Thornfield? I thought back to dinner, to the moment when he'd asked about my last name. Had he seemed surprised? Or had he seemed like someone who was confirming something he already suspected? I couldn't remember. Everything from last night felt tainted now, colored by suspicion and doubt. Of course he wasn't surprised, Victoria continued, because he already knew exactly who you were. The collision, the scattered papers, the charming way he helped you collect them, all of it perfectly calculated to make you trust him. Stop, I said, my voice breaking. Just stop. I'm trying to protect you, Isabella, from a man who sees you as nothing more than a means to an end. Protect me? Like you've been protecting me for the past 3 years? The words exploded out of me before I could stop them. By keeping me in the dark about my own inheritance? By making me feel worthless and unwanted? By planning to marry me off to some fortune hunter? Silence fell like a guillotine. Victoria's mask of concern slipped, revealing something cold and calculating underneath. You know about that? I know about a lot of things, I lied, hoping I sounded more confident than I felt. The question is, what are you really afraid of? That Alex will steal my inheritance, or that I'll finally take control of my own life? Your own life? Victoria laughed, but there was no humor in it. Darling, you have no idea how to control anything. You're a child playing dress-up in adult situations. Maybe I was, I said, surprising myself with the strength in my voice. But I'm not anymore. I turned toward the door, but Victoria's voice stopped me. If you walk out that door, Isabella, if you choose to trust Alexander Whitmore over your own family, you'll lose everything. The house, your allowance, your place in this family. Are you really willing to risk it all for a man you've known for one day? I looked back at her, this woman who had made my life miserable for 3 years, who had stolen my inheritance and planned to steal my future, and felt something shift inside me. Victoria, I said quietly, you're not my family. You never were. And I walked out. I made it halfway to Emma's car before the tears started. Not delicate, ladylike tears, but ugly, gut-wrenching sobs that left me gasping for air. Emma took one look at me and pulled me into a fierce hug. What happened? She demanded. What did that witch say to you? Between hiccups and shaky breaths, I told her everything. The will, the inheritance conditions, the accusation that Alex was using me, Victoria's threats about losing everything. Okay, Emma said when I finished, her voice deadly calm. First of all, Victoria can go throw herself off a cliff. Second, we're going to figure out the truth about Alex before you make any decisions about anything. How? We're going to that lunch. We're going to listen to what he has to say. And then we're going to decide whether he's Prince Charming or the big bad wolf. What if Victoria's right? What if everything last night was just an act? Emma was quiet for a moment, then said softly, Isabella, do you remember what you told me about the way he looked at you? The way he made you feel? Yes. That wasn't acting. I've seen you with enough jerks to know the difference. Whatever Alex is hiding, whatever complications he's dealing with, I don't think his feelings for you are fake. But what if? No what ifs, Emma said firmly. You're going to put on your big girl panties, march into that restaurant, and demand the truth. Because you're Isabella Thornfield Hayes, you're worth $53 million, and you deserve to know exactly what you're dealing with. She was right. I was tired of being kept in the dark, tired of other people making decisions about my life, tired of feeling like a victim in my own story. It was time to take control, even if it meant discovering that the man I was falling in love with was my enemy. You know that moment in every fairy tale when everything seems lost? When the princess thinks her prince has betrayed her, and the whole world feels like it's ending? Well, sometimes the real magic happens when you discover that the truth is more beautiful than any lie could ever be. I walked into Café Bellecourt at exactly noon, my heart hammering so hard I was surprised it wasn't audible to every patron in the restaurant. Alex was already there, sitting at a corner table with his back to the wall, looking like a man preparing for battle. When he saw me, His entire face lit up with that smile that had been haunting my dreams. Then he noticed my expression, and his smile faltered. "Isabella," he said, standing as I approached. Are you okay?" "We need to talk," I said without preamble, sliding into the chair across from him. "About everything. About Thornfield Industries, about your real reasons for being here, and about what you knew about me before yesterday." Alex went very still. "I see. Do you? Because I've spent the morning learning some very interesting things about my father's will, about your company's plans for acquisition, and about just how convenient it was that I happened to crash into you in that parking lot." "Isabella." "No." I held up a hand, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "You said last night that we needed to talk about complications, so let's talk. But I want the truth, Alex. All of it. Because if you've been playing me from the beginning, if this has all been some elaborate business strategy, I need to know now." Alex looked down at his hands, then back at me, and I saw something in his green eyes that looked like pain. "You're right," he said quietly. "There are things I should have told you. Things I wanted to tell you last night before everything got complicated." My stomach dropped. "So Victoria was right? You were using me?" "What? No." His response was so immediate and vehement that several other diners turned to look at us. "Isabella, no. God, no. Is that what you think?" "I don't know what to think anymore," I whispered, feeling tears prick at my eyes. "Tell me the truth, Alex. Please." He was quiet for a long moment, clearly choosing his words carefully. Then he pulled out his phone and opened what looked like a recording app. "Before I say anything else," he said, "I want you to know that I'm recording this conversation, not to protect myself, but to protect you. Because what I'm about to tell you involves some very powerful people who wouldn't hesitate to destroy both of us if they thought we were a threat." The world seemed to tilt slightly. "What are you talking about?" "Isabella, Whitmore Holdings isn't trying to acquire Thornfield Industries to destroy it. We're trying to acquire it to save it." He leaned forward intently. "Your stepmother has been systematically embezzling from the company for the past 2 years. She's hidden the theft through a series of shell companies and fake contracts, but she's stolen nearly $30 million. I felt like someone had just hit me with a baseball bat. That's impossible." "I have the documents," Alex said gently. "Bank records, forged signatures, fabricated invoices. My forensic accountants have been building the case for months. But why would you care? Why would you spend months investigating?" "Because," Alex said, his voice growing softer, 3 years ago, I met your father at a business conference. We only talked for an hour, but he spent that entire hour talking about his daughter. About how proud he was of you, how brilliant you were, how worried he was about leaving you with a stepmother he'd started to suspect was stealing from the company." My breath caught. He knew. He suspected. But he died before he could prove anything. Alex reached into his briefcase and pulled out a manila folder. "He asked me to look out for you if anything happened to him. He said you were too trusting, too kind, and that he was afraid Victoria would take advantage of that." With shaking hands, I opened the folder. Inside was a letter in my father's handwriting, addressed to Alexander Whitmore and dated just 1 week before the accident that killed him. "Mr. Whitmore," the letter began, "if you're reading this, then something has happened to me, and I need you to keep the promise you made in Chicago. Please protect my daughter. She's going to inherit everything, but Victoria will try to steal it from her. Isabella is brilliant and strong, but she's never had to fight someone truly ruthless before. She'll need someone she can trust. The will contains a clause that allows her to inherit if the company is dissolved. Victoria doesn't know about this clause. I hid it in the legal language. If she steals enough to bankrupt the company, the dissolution clause will trigger, and Isabella will get everything, including the proof she needs to send Victoria to prison. Watch over her for me. She deserves to be happy." James Thornfield tears were streaming down my face as I finished reading. "He knew," I whispered. "He knew what she would do." "The collision yesterday," Alex said softly. "That really was an accident. I had no idea you would be there. But when you told me your name, when I realized who you were, he smiled slightly. It felt like fate. But the acquisition is real, but not the way Victoria described it. Alex pulled out another document. We're offering market value for Thornfield Industries, not a fraction of it. And we plan to keep the company intact, just under new management. Management that won't steal from the employees' pension fund. She stole from the pension fund? The hits just kept coming. Among other things. Alex's expression hardened. Isabella, your stepmother is a criminal. She's been planning to bleed the company dry and then trigger the dissolution clause herself, claiming the company failed due to market forces. She would have gotten your inheritance through the marriage clause in the will, then disappeared with over $80 million. The marriage clause, I said slowly. She was planning to marry me off to someone. To her nephew, actually. A charming man with a gambling addiction and no moral compass whatsoever. Alex's jaw tightened. The wedding was supposed to be next month. I felt sick. How do you know all this? Because, Alex said, his voice growing dangerous. Conrad Ashworth is my cousin, and when he got drunk last week and started bragging about his upcoming marriage to a rich heiress who didn't know she was rich, I knew exactly what Victoria was planning. The restaurant seemed to spin around me. Your cousin? My cousin, who I haven't spoken to in 5 years because he's a narcissistic sociopath who thinks women are commodities to be traded. Alex reached across the table and took my hands. Isabella, I came to town to stop your stepmother from stealing your inheritance and to prevent her from forcing you into a marriage that would have destroyed your life. You came here to save me, I said in wonder. I came here to honor a promise I made to your father. His thumbs brushed across my knuckles. Falling in love with you was never part of the plan. My heart stopped. What did you say? I said falling in love with you was never part of the plan. His green eyes were soft and vulnerable. But from the moment you crashed into me in that parking lot, from the moment I saw you chasing those papers with your hair flying everywhere and pure determination on your face, I was gone. Completely, utterly gone. Alex, I know it's crazy. I know we've only known each other for 2 days. But Isabella, you're everything your father said you were and more. You're brilliant and funny and kind and beautiful, and I want to spend the rest of my life making you happy. Even though I'm a walking disaster? Especially because you're a walking disaster, he said with that devastating smile. You're my walking disaster. I was crying again, but this time they were happy tears. I love you too, I whispered. I thought I was losing my mind. Falling for someone so fast. But sometimes, Alex said, leaning across the table to cup my face in his hands. Love doesn't wait for convenient timing. He kissed me then, soft and sweet and full of promise. And I felt like every broken piece of my life was finally clicking into place. When we broke apart, I was breathless and dizzy and completely, utterly happy. So, I said, trying to regain some composure. What happens now? With Victoria, with the company, with everything? Alex's expression grew serious. Now, we finish this. Together. Because tomorrow morning, I'm presenting all the evidence to the FBI, and Victoria Thornfield is going to discover that stealing from your own stepdaughter was the biggest mistake of her life. And us, Alex said, brushing a tear from my cheek. We're going to live happily ever after, if you'll have me. I smiled through my tears, feeling like the princess I'd never known I was. Yes, I whispered, yes to everything. They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but I prefer mine served with a side of justice, a generous helping of romance, and just enough poetic irony to make the universe smile. The FBI raid on the Thornfield mansion happened at exactly 6 a.m. on a Tuesday, which seemed appropriately dramatic for the downfall of someone as theatrical as Victoria. I watched from Alex's car as federal agents marched up the circular driveway I'd walked down so many times, armed with warrants and evidence boxes. Are you okay? Alex asked, squeezing my hand as we observed Victoria being led away in handcuffs, her perfect hair finally looking as disheveled as her life had become. "I'm perfect," I said, and meant it. "Is it wrong that I'm enjoying this? Given that she stole your inheritance, embezzled from a children's charity, and tried to force you into marriage with my sociopathic cousin, I think a little satisfaction is completely justified." Scarlett appeared in the doorway, still in her silk pajamas, screaming something at the agents that was probably very unladylike. She'd been granted immunity in exchange for testimony, but watching her world crumble was its own kind of justice. "What happens to her?" I asked, as Scarlett was escorted to a separate car. "Witness protection program, probably. She'll spend the rest of her life being boring in Nebraska or somewhere equally devastating to her sense of style." I laughed, despite everything. "You're terrible. I'm practical. There's a difference." 3 months later. "Are you absolutely certain about this?" Emma asked for the 15th time, adjusting the train of my wedding dress with the precision of a military general. "I mean, I know he's rich and gorgeous and basically perfect, but you've only known him for 3 months. "Emma," I said patiently, "we've been through this. When you know, you know. But what if you get cold feet? What if you trip walking down the aisle? What if—" "Emma." I turned to face my best friend and maid of honor, resplendent in emerald green silk. "Breathe. I'm marrying the man I love. I'm worth $53 million, and my evil stepmother is in federal prison. This is literally the best day of my life." "Okay, but if I trip, Alex will catch me. He always does." The wedding coordinator peeked into the bridal suite. "It's time, Miss Thornfield Hayes." I took one last look in the mirror. The dress was a fairy tale confection of ivory silk and antique lace, with a cathedral train that made me feel like an actual princess. My hair cascaded in soft curls over my shoulders, held back by a tiara that had belonged to Alex's grandmother. "Ready, Your Highness?" Emma asked with a grin. "Ready." The ceremony was held in the gardens of Alex's estate, under an archway of white roses and baby's breath. 300 guests filled the white chairs, but I only had eyes for the man waiting for me at the altar. Alex looked devastating in his black tuxedo, his dark hair perfectly styled, his green eyes bright with unshed tears as he watched me walk down the petal-strewn aisle. When I reached him, he whispered, "You're so beautiful it should be illegal." "Good thing you know some good lawyers," I whispered back, making him laugh. The ceremony was perfect, except for the moment when I nearly dropped the ring. Alex caught it before it hit the ground naturally. And when a bee decided to investigate my bouquet mid-vow, Alex gently shooed it away without missing a beat. "Do you, Isabella, take Alexander to be your husband?" the minister asked. "I do," I said, my voice strong and clear. "And do you, Alexander, take Isabella to be your wife?" "I absolutely do," Alex said, grinning at me like I was the most wonderful thing he'd ever seen. "You may kiss your bride." Alex didn't need to be told twice. He kissed me like we were the only 2 people in the world, and I melted into his arms as our guests erupted in cheers. When we broke apart, he rested his forehead against mine and whispered, "Hello, Mrs. Whitmore." "Hello, husband," I whispered back, and felt my heart overflow with happiness. 1 year later, I stood in the nursery of our penthouse apartment, painting the final touches on a mural of a castle surrounded by wildflowers. My very pregnant belly made reaching the higher sections challenging, but I was determined to finish before our daughter arrived. "You know we have people who could do that for you," Alex said from the doorway, looking devastatingly handsome in his business suit with his tie loosened and his sleeves rolled up. "I want to do it myself," I said, adding a tiny bird to one of the towers. "Besides, she should know from the beginning that her mommy is an artist, and that her daddy is completely wrapped around her tiny finger already," Alex said, crossing the room to wrap his arms around me from behind, his hands settling on my bump. "She's going to be spoiled rotten," I agreed happily, "just like her mother." "Hey, I'm not spoiled. Darling, you literally own a small art gallery, have a full-time staff to manage your foundation for underprivileged children, And yesterday, you made me drive across town because you wanted ice cream from that one specific shop. That ice cream is exceptional and you know it. It is exceptional, Alex agreed, kissing my neck. Almost as exceptional as my wife. I leaned back against his chest, feeling our daughter kick against his hands. Do you think she'll be a disaster magnet like me? God, I hope so, Alex said fervently. The world needs more beautiful disasters. You're biased. Completely and utterly biased, he confirmed. It's one of my best qualities. We stood there in comfortable silence, watching the sunset paint the nursery in golden light, surrounded by the life we'd built together. A life that had started with flying papers and a parking lot collision and had somehow become more perfect than any fairy tale I'd ever read. Alex, I said softly. Thank you. For what? For catching me when I fell. Literally and figuratively. He turned me in his arms, careful of my belly, and cupped my face in his hands. Isabella, you've got it backwards. You caught me. From the moment you crashed into my life, you've been saving me. We saved each other, I corrected, standing on my tiptoes to kiss him. We saved each other, he agreed against my lips. And as our daughter kicked again as if agreeing with our assessment, I couldn't help but think that sometimes the best fairy tales are the ones you write yourself, complete with flying papers, evil stepmothers, FBI raids, and the kind of love that makes you believe in magic. Even if you are a walking disaster who trips over her own feet and spills coffee on billionaires. Especially then, the end. And they lived happily, chaotically, beautifully ever after.